There is hardly a debate about the lack of success of South Africa's vaccine rollout. As we head into June, South Africa stands behind many countries around the world, including countries on our own continent, with regard to the number of people per 100 vaccinated. With only about 1 million people having received the vaccine, there is little that an inspiring speech by the president or a carefully crafted statement could do to convince South Africans not to be despondent. Add a third wave into the mix and the fact that we are in the midst of winter, and there is little wonder that South Africans are concerned. As a member of Discovery Medical Aid, if I pinned my hopes on Discovery or any of the other medical aids being the savior during this process, I might have been left disappointed. Of course, I'm aware of the facts. I'm aware that although regulation-wise, medical aids can purchase the vaccine, the pharmaceutical companies have not allowed them to do so. There are also some things that I assume. I assume that Discovery is trying because I have received years of cover, of care for myself and for my family. I know what an innovative company they are. And I also assume that they are walking a very fine line with an eye on a future partnership around NHI. I've had the privilege of chatting to Dr. Ron Whelan, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Discovery Health, on a number of occasions. I found him to be open, authentic, caring, and I also know how hard he is working to get vaccines into the arms of South Africans. That is why I asked for this podcast. I'm Howard Feldman. This is a Synthesis COVID podcast. My guest today is Dr. Ron Whelan, CIO of Discovery Health. Ron, a very, very good afternoon to you. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. How are you?
Yeah, good afternoon to you too, Howard. Thank you for hosting us. Looking forward to the conversation this afternoon.
So Discovery, obviously, from everything we've seen, is in a difficult position. We know to some extent that you're involved in the process. You've been very careful not to criticize and comment on the process along the way. We know your vaccine centers are open. Anybody who's able to go there, who has qualified, speaks very highly of it. Take us through a little bit of the journey through to get to this point on the 1st of June.
Yeah, it's the last year has been challenging for all of us. COVID has thrown us all a curveball during the last year or so, and we're over a year into the pandemic already, and we've gone through various phases and various waves of the pandemic. Obviously the latest phase is the vaccination rollout campaign. And it has been a challenging vaccination campaign for a variety of reasons. Some of the reasons within our control as a country, and many of the reasons outside of our control as a country. I think the first and most important starting point on this is that it really has been a global race for vaccines globally. So we're up against some pretty hard-hitting and powerful countries globally. The likes of the US, the UK, Europe, Australia, and so on and so forth, who've got significant resources at their disposal, and certainly lots of muscle on the global landscape. And we've really got to punch above our weight on that front. And as you rightly mentioned, it's been challenging in terms of procuring vaccines globally. The manufacturers have only been engaging with national governments in vaccine procurement. I can tell you that as Discovery, we started engaging manufacturers as early as August last year already, with a view to seeing whether we could unlock vaccines, not only for Discovery, but for the country more broadly. And faced many challenges throughout that journey. So it's really been a global race for vaccines. And then, of course, we've had some unfortunate setbacks in our vaccine program, starting as early as in February. You'll recall the AstraZeneca,
the 1 million doses
that arrived through COVAX. And unfortunately, shortly after arriving, a study was released out of Wits under Shapir Mahdi that proved that the AstraZeneca vaccine was going to be largely ineffective against the new variant at the time, the B1351 variant. And as a result, we couldn't use those AstraZeneca doses. Then went into a procurement phase that with Pfizer, and then with J&J, fortunate enough for Glenn DeGray and team to unlock some J&J doses, and then ran into some obstacles with J&J. You'll remember the clotting challenges J&J had in the middle of the Sisonke trial, which was completely out of our control.
And absurd, I might add. Absurd, given the fact that that the numbers were vanishingly low, as Professor Barry Shub said to me, and yet we stopped it and delayed it once again.
Yeah, at the same time, I think what I have been reassured about throughout COVID, as well as the vaccination program, is that our institutional structures have held firm and strong. And it shows that we have a very good regulatory framework within South Africa. And actually, that as a clinician, that gives me a lot of reassurance. It means that our quality standards are high. We don't cut corners around your qualities, particularly when it comes to your clinical, outcomes and parameters. So I must say, I was reassured by us putting the J&J program on hold for a short while, waiting for the data to emerge. As soon as the data emerged, then we moved ahead again. And we've seen a similar delay now with J&J in the last few weeks.
That was one of our questions, because I thought we had procured another 1.1 million doses, but that they were meant to arrive in May, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly. And another unfortunate instance completely outside of South Africa's control. So the active pharmaceutical ingredient for the J&J vaccine is manufactured in the US, in fact in Baltimore in the US. And the FDA picked up some manufacturing irregularities in the manufacture of the active pharmaceutical ingredient. In fact, that plant in the US manufactures the active pharmaceutical ingredient for the AstraZeneca vaccine and the J&J vaccine. And there seems to have been some issues picked up in that manufacture. That active pharmaceutical ingredient was used for the production of the vaccine out of the Aspen facility in the Eastern Cape. Subsequently, it looks like that ingredient has been cleared by the FDA. We're waiting for final reports on that. So it looks like it'll come out fine. But once again, I think it just shows you the level of rigor and regulatory, making sure that we don't put the public at any risk throughout this process.
But do you find that are these types of challenges unique to South Africa? We're not, when we look at other countries and we look at some of the numbers that they've managed to achieve, and then we look at us with just hitting 1 million since February, which is 5 months. Is everybody else going through what we are going through?
Oh, there's no doubt we're behind. I mean, when you compare our progress to the US, the UK, Israel in particular, even places like Chile, they've managed to vaccinate upwards of 50-60% of their populations. At the same time, there are many countries that are in a similar position to us. So Australia has just got its program going at the moment. New Zealand's just starting to get its program going. Many countries across Europe are in the early stages of their program, similarly in South America. So while we're behind in comparison with some of the bigger countries, we're certainly not behind in global terms. I think we're always trying. We set our bar quite high in South Africa and want to be ahead of the curve. It's not great being behind.
No.
But comparatively globally, and not in terrible shape.
And in truth, it's a fairly different position for Discovery to be in, because to a large extent, Discovery is a company that's always ahead. You mentioned punching above your weight, ahead in terms of innovation. This is not a position that, as a company, I would imagine you used to being in.
No, not at all. A very awkward position for us to be in. We like to be at the forefront, cutting edge, technology, drugs. We'd like to make the latest oncologicals available to our members, the latest surgeries available to our members. That we'll fly people out to the US if you're
absolutely, and this is why I say I know that as a member of Discovery. So therefore, it's almost a very different conversation to be having. Part of my concern is that you are almost being, from a marketing point of view, co-branded with government. And I know you can't talk to that. I can talk to that, but that's because that's a concern for me, as somebody who knows the company from a bit of a different perspective. It has put Discovery, I think, in a compromised position. It's a very, very difficult position, because it's very clear to me that you want to do what you can to assist the whole country and government, but at the same time, I happen to think it might be coming at a cost. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we acknowledge that we're part of a broader ecosystem. Yeah, so we have an obligation to protect our members. We have an obligation to protect our employees. We have an obligation to South Africa. So we play many roles in the ecosystem, and they're all important roles. I think the COVID pandemic is really brought to the fore on none of us are safe until we're all safe. So I think we recognize that. Even if we were able to procure vaccines early in the process and able to get the Discovery base vaccinated, in fact, the base would not be protected because the broader environment would not be protected. So I think there is a big national role for us to play in accelerating the uptake of vaccinations across the country, and that indirectly protects our membership base as well. And I think we feel quite strongly about that. We've been part of the B4SA process, part of the national process since the start of the pandemic, as early as 4th of March last year, sat in these steering committee discussions around guiding the national response. And we're proud of the contribution we've made. Would we have liked to have gone faster? Of course. And I think as a country we'd all wanted to go faster. But I think we are getting to a point where the vast majority of the population will get vaccinated. It will be an equitable rollout around that, and ultimately we will all be safe.
I mentioned a concern that Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, mentioned the Sinovac. You mentioned Sputnik 5. That, of course, made me a little bit concerned. I spoke to Professor Adrian Purin, who's the acting head of the NICD, and he said again, very, very reassuring, actually, something you alluded to before, is that we have the structures in this country, and nothing will be approved unless it needs to be approved. Would you echo that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our institutions have held strong. If you look at the two vaccines, notwithstanding the delays in J&J, Pfizer and J&J are both very reputable, long-standing pharmaceutical companies. These vaccines have undergone rigorous trials. They've both passed with flying colors. They've both been implemented at scale now. The Pfizer vaccine in particular. I'm very proud that we've got these two vaccines in play. They really are exceptional products. At the same time, I think we're seeing some good data on the Sinopharm vaccine out of China in particular. Has been rolled out across several countries, including countries across the UAE, are seeing really good results. But SAHPRA is holding back on fully fledged data and wants to make sure that those vaccines are entirely safe and effective. Same holds true for Sputnik. I think you're seeing good results in certain countries. Perhaps not as much transparency on the data, but we're holding back. And as soon as we get the transparency, we'd certainly look at putting those vaccines and some other vaccines in the pipeline into play. But I think it's a testimony to our clinicians, our scientists, and our regulatory authorities in SA.
Let's just talk for a moment about the actual process, because that has certainly, we put out the fact that we're going to be having this podcast to social media, and a lot of the questions we got back are around the registration process. What is the point of registering on the Discovery site as well as government site? Do they talk to each other? Why isn't Discovery looking at people with comorbidities? Can we just talk a little bit about the registration process and fulfillment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think firstly, we all know that there's a national electronic vaccination data system, or otherwise called EVDS. You have to be registered on EVDS to access vaccination in South Africa. And there's a very simple reason for that, in that we need to coordinate a national response, and we need to be able to track how the populace is being vaccinated. You can imagine if we didn't have a system like that, how chaotic things would be, and how it would have been impossible to track who'd been vaccinated and who hadn't been vaccinated. So we would never have a sense on how quickly we're moving to population immunity. So, and I think credit to the National Department of Health and government to getting that system up and running. I think we had lots of questions around the system, around whether it would be ready in time, whether it would work. And I must say I was delighted in the first 2 weeks of the program where it's up and running. It works. Of course, there's some glitches and teething issues in the system, but I think those of us who built systems before recognize that there are never not teething issues in systems.
Insofar implemented so quickly as well.
Yeah, exactly. Insofar the Discovery Vaccination Portal, so we designed and developed the Discovery Vaccination Portal very early in the process, and developed it in parallel with the EVDS system. It's a full electronic health record that's connected into our electronic health record ecosystem. It's designed to support EVDS. It's also designed to provide Discovery members with an enhanced vaccination journey. I think when we looked at the EVDS system, we recognized that there were some features there that were missing that our Discovery members would see benefit from. So additional information on vaccines, digital vaccine certificates, second dose reminders, and the range of the other functionalities that we're working on. So we thought it was an important adjunct to EVDS. And I'm delighted we've got it in place, because it now allows us to continue to build that functionality out over the coming months. Remember, we're going to be vaccinating over the course of the next 6 months at least, and then it'll probably be boosted doses that will follow on the back of that. So it gives us a very powerful way of supporting our members through this initial phase of the vaccination journey and subsequent phases thereafter.
But is there value in a member registering on the Discovery site as well as EVDS?
Yeah, so I can let you know that we are busy with an integration with EVDS at the moment. That will mean that you will only need to register on one or the other. It should really streamline the journey for Discovery members. We've been working on this for a while already. We'll hopefully announce this in the next few days, so you're getting a sneak preview.
Well, you've just announced it now. Well, kind of.
It's great for Discovery members. It's great for EVDS in that we get to drive the uptake of EVDS through the Discovery membership base. It's great for Discovery members in that you'll come in through your one portal going forward.
Right. And I would imagine that'll allow Discovery members at least to have a different type of experience, because a lot of the questions that we received were from Discovery members who would say things like, what happens if I missed my SMS and I couldn't get there? Who do I contact? Who do I speak to? It's almost as though there's this confusion and no one knows where to go. I would imagine once this is integrated, that Discovery members at least would have another point of reference to be able to speak.
Well, exactly. We, as Discovery, we've actually employed over 150 people in a dedicated vaccination call center, recognizing the confusion, the uncertainty, the anxiety, and the landscape. So I've had that call center up and running for a few weeks already. And that really provides our members with a layer of support on the Discovery vaccination portal. Also recognize that the EVDS system didn't have a call center for many weeks. It's now, I'm glad to say, has a call center up and running. And while that call center didn't exist on the EVDS front, we really needed to support your members through both the Discovery vaccination portal journey as well as the EVDS journey.
Ron, a lot of questions that we're receiving a lot of questions around people walk-ins, maybe at the end of the day, if there's vaccines left over, if somebody is over 60 but doesn't have an SMS. Can you talk us through that? Because there seems to be, one day in Business Insider, there was an article saying, yes, over 60s walk in. The next day, it wasn't. So there's quite a lot of confusion there. Also, some comments from Cape Townian viewers saying what's happening down in Cape Town. Can you give us an overview there, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think let me quickly update you on the Discovery Vaccination Centre rollout. Yes, we obviously get a lot of questions on this. I think firstly, we are planning a rollout of vaccination centres across the country. We started at one Discovery Place, and I'm very proud to let you know that one Discovery Place, actually the biggest vaccination centre in SA at the moment. You're closely followed by our colleagues at Mill Park. We've actually, as of today, vaccinated over 15,000 people across at one Discovery Place. And our intention is certainly to roll out similar centres across the country. We'd like to get to the Western Cape, Eastern Cape, KZN as quickly as possible. We are facing some vaccine supply constraints. So the reason we've had to pull back a little bit on our rollout plans is that there's a shortage of vaccines in South Africa for the duration of June. As soon as that unlocks, then we're able to accelerate on our rollout. There've also been some challenges in getting licenses across your provinces outside of your Gauteng, and we're working through some of those regulatory challenges. But I can assure you that as soon as possible, we're going to be in the Western Cape and KZN and various other provinces. Insofar as how the vaccination centres run, we prefer to run the Discovery Vaccination Centres on a scheduled-only basis. So the EVDS system schedules people in 2-hour slots for the vaccination centres. That's important for two reasons. The first reason it's important is it gives everyone a uniform experience. You can imagine at one Discovery Place, for example, where we're vaccinating in the order of 2,300 people a day. If you say, come on Wednesday, all 2,300 people arrive at 8 o'clock on Wednesday morning, and you end up spending the bulk of your day waiting. So if you clunk it out into 2-hour slots, everyone gets a uniform experience and low wait times. The second reason we need to do that is we're obviously in the midst of a third wave, and you need to spread the load on these centres so that you don't create super spreader events. So we're very, very cautious around COVID protocols and making sure that all of our vaccination centres are very safe and hygienic environments, that there's adequate airflow and protection for everyone across the vaccination centre. So for those two reasons, we run on a scheduled only basis. We did have a walk-in day about, I think it was 2 weeks ago. So what happened was the EVDS system didn't schedule any appointments for us on that particular day. We sat with doses that were already drawn up, ready for the day's vaccination, but no one in the building. So we were quite anxious about that, and we were preparing to send out a message to members and people in the area that would run that particular day as a walk-in. It slipped out on social media, and within 45 minutes, we had a queue 2,000 people deep on both sides of the building. We were unfortunately that they were only able to accommodate in the order of 1,400 people, so had to turn some folks away. But I think that day just demonstrated for us firstly the level of the demand across the system and the anxiety to get vaccinated, but also the dangers of running a walk-in at scale. There's real danger around your crowds building up, and that doesn't become is not safe from a COVID perspective, and certainly becomes an uncomfortable environment from a wait time perspective. So we much prefer to run on a scheduled basis. It gives us uniformity, and we'll certainly run all of our vaccination centres in that way going forward.
This no walk-in policy, is that only at the Discovery venues, or is that an edict across all vaccination sites?
Well, certainly across Discovery and across most of the private sector sites. There are certain sites who are running a hybrid model, so part walk-in, part scheduled. That happens across a few of the private sector sites, and then more commonly across some of the public sector sites. What you typically find in those models is that there would be one queue for scheduled appointments and another queue for walk-ins.
Okay.
And what you typically find across those sites is that the queue for walk-ins is significantly longer than the queue for scheduled appointments. So I think on the basis of that, rather go for a scheduled appointment if at all possible. And we're certainly trying to process as quickly as possible. So so walk in across most sites. Sorry, scheduled across most sites, and then walk in certain instances.
When I spoke to the Department of Health, I think it was on Friday, one of the things that he mentioned was the algorithm that the EVDS is using, which is to say that nobody, the minute you've hit your 60th birthday at the moment, whether you're 60 or 168, it doesn't really matter. Whether you have comorbidities or not, it doesn't really matter. All that really matters is that you're over 60, that when you've registered, and also that you live in an urban area within 10 kilometers of a vaccination site, and in a non-urban area, in a rural area within 30 kilometers. Do you foresee that changing? And is Discovery, are you comfortable with that? Because a lot of the doctors that I've spoken to as well are quite concerned about the fact that people with comorbidities aren't being vaccinated at this stage if they're under 60.
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to that. I think the first part on that is we completely agree with the prioritization of people above the age of 60. The evidence there is conclusive. Those are the population groups at the higher risk of hospitalization and poor outcomes if they contract COVID. In fact, what we find in the Discovery data is if you're over the age of 70, over the age of 80, 50 to 60% chance of being hospitalized as a result of COVID. So that's just no-brainer terrain. Start with the elderly populations. I think we certainly would have preferred to do what most other countries have done, and start over 80s, over 70s, over 60s. So perhaps wouldn't have opened up to the entire over 60 population, bearing in mind that there are 5 million people over the age of 60 in South Africa. Which is a lot of people. When you start to narrow it into over 70s and over 80s, it becomes a much smaller cadre. So perhaps open up a little bit too widely initially, but that said, I think we'll get through those populations quickly. The second point is your point around comorbidities. So we certainly know that there are certain chronic conditions, most notably diabetes, hypertension, ischemic heart disease, and a few other conditions that result in poorer COVID-related outcomes. This has been a more challenging debate for us to have. So while there's a clear rationale to prioritize people with certain comorbidities, it's relatively easy to do in a medical scheme environment. And I can tell you, we've already identified 474,000 members below the age of 60 with comorbidities. In a public sector environment, much harder to do. In fact, almost impossible to do, because you don't have the electronic health records and the data. So I think being a national program, we need to drive towards equitable access. And if you kind of got one set of data on one side and another lack of data on another side, you need to find a common meeting point on that. And as a result of that, I think the conclusion there is, if we follow a very strict age prioritization, as most countries have done for practical purposes and clinical purposes, you end up meeting the objective in a similar way. We might have done it slightly differently, but at the same time, I think you're not uncomfortable with the current approach of age-based prioritization.
Right. And in terms of that comment, which is interesting, we might have done things differently. Discovery's been very uncritical of any of the processes or any of the decisions made. That I would imagine was a deliberate decision. How have you managed that, where you haven't necessarily agreed with something that you were forced, in a way, I use the word forced, but that you were compelled to live with?
Yeah, it's been quite an interesting experience. I think having worked so closely now with the National Department of Health team and the Director General and the Minister in particular, you start to understand some of the pressures and strains that they face on a day-to-day basis as well. It's a complex environment. So it's they've got provincial pressures, they've got treasury pressures, they've got regulatory pressures. I mean, it is very complex environment. So in many instances, we would put a recommendation on the table, and they would outline the 3 or 4 reasons why that wasn't achievable. And when you listen to them, you're like, that makes sense. If I was in your shoes, I would probably react in a similar way. So I think on the one hand, there is a lot of justification for what has transpired, and we certainly have a greater appreciation for some of the complexities of government business. We also have an appreciation for the way our systems are structured and the way the institutions work, and now there's good safeguards for all of us. At the same time, I think we have a restless thirst to get things done and shake things up. And I think our government counterparts have learned from some of our restlessness as well, and some of our ability to move quickly, think quickly, push the boundaries a little bit. So it's been quite an interesting.
So it is a fascinating point, because how significant has Discovery's contribution been to the national rollout? Well, I'm asking you to be immodest. Yes.
I would prefer our government counterparts to comment on that, and our partners in B4SA to comment on that. I mean, what I can tell you is we have done everything we physically and humanly possible could be. So if there was a problem that needed to get solved, we would throw resources at it and throw time and energy at it, and invested significantly in all aspects of the program. It's just the way we're wired. If there's a problem, the problem needs to get solved in one way or the other. And I hope that's made some small contribution to unlocking some of the elements of the program.
Yeah, I'm sure. What has it meant to Ron Whelan the last year or so?
Wow, that's a challenging question. So I think firstly, I'm humbled to have been part of this journey. There are many leaders involved in this initiative. Adrian has spent enormous amount of time on this initiative. My colleague Ryan Noach has spent time on this. Our colleague Yanda and Saluba has spent time on this, and significant effort. Our colleagues at B4SA have really leaned in, and for me personally to be part of this team has been hugely rewarding and humbling. I think equally it's given us an appreciation of, as I mentioned before, some of the complexities of running a country effectively, and really running a national program at scale. So certainly have learned a lot on that front. And then I think probably most important is the ability to be agile. So we've needed to be agile. Things change on a daily basis in COVID, almost by the hour. Systems don't work, supply chains don't work, contracts are complicated. The variants emerge, treatment regimes change. It is new stuff day in, day out. We read preprints on a daily basis. I mean, I think I was remarking to a team earlier on this week. If you recall, last year this time, the WHO recommendation was we didn't need to wear masks.
I know. I keep reminding some of the experts what they told us right in the beginning and how things have changed. But it has changed. It's been humbling for the doctors as well, because coming from a position that they know so much, almost realized that there's many things they didn't know.
Exactly. I mean, I think coming out of COVID, we've learned how to learn, I would say. And that's what we've learned. We've learned how to learn fast, which is, we've moved from these long journal articles to, Twitter and preprints and
places you never wanted to go, and will never want to go again after COVID, for sure.
It's brilliant. I think there's many more things we can do in healthcare if we move much more quickly on some of the emerging science and emerging evidence, and we put things out into social media and they get critiqued on the fly. Been fascinating to watch, and of course we haven't always got it right. There's no doubt about that. But many times we have also got it right, and we're very confident that we're going to navigate the remaining phases of this pandemic safely and efficiently.
Well, that really is the important question now, is how do you foresee the next few months playing out? Are you confident that South Africans are going to get a vaccine in their arms, and that we're going to be getting it in our arms efficiently?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think what gives me the most confidence is we got over 60 million doses of vaccine scheduled for South Africa. And I'm confident that the J&J doses will come through at some stage. It is a good underlying vaccine. It's been a technical issue in the manufacturing process rather than a fundamental issue. 60 million doses gets all adults in South Africa vaccinated. It probably gets us into people between the ages of 12 to 18 as well, which is where vaccines have now been approved. It's a mountain to climb. I mean, these are big numbers. Even if you look at the discovery base, and I'll share some of the numbers with you, we've got 3.1 million people across our client base that need to get vaccinated. That translates into somewhere around 5.5 million vaccine doses that need to be delivered. 5.5 million doses over a period of 4 to 6 months means that we've got to be vaccinating 40,000 people a day. Now, 40,000 people a day sounds manageable when you put it on a piece of paper, but just to help you calibrate, 40,000 people is the equivalent of 2 Comrades marathon fields. And we've all seen the start and finish for a Comrades marathon. People streaming across the finish line of the Comrades marathon. That's 20,000 people. We've got to do 40,000 people every single day for the next 4 to 6 months, day in, day out. And that's just to get the discovery clients and membership base vaccinated. 3 million people.
It's really immense. But you are reasonably confident. You actually sound more than reasonably. You actually sound very confident that this is going to happen, and that South Africans will be taken care of.
We'll get there. I mean, just I think the word of caution to your audience is we've got to be a little bit patient. It is going to take a little bit of time. One of the things you probably saw earlier on, we've all got to wait our turn. One of the things that really inspired me a little bit earlier this week is the Duchess of Cambridge in the UK.
I thought that was incredible. Yeah, I was shocked. That she had not been vaccinated, and I thought that's really incredible.
Brilliant. I mean, hugely inspiring. I think she's just under 40. They're obviously vaccinating people between the ages of 30 and 32 in the UK at the moment. And we've vaccinated, there are 1 million people in South Africa who've been vaccinated before the Duchess of Cambridge. So little bit of patience in relative terms. These few months will pale into insignificance over time. At the same time, I don't want to underplay this. This is a serious pandemic. It's a serious infection. We must move as quickly as possible to get people vaccinated as quickly as possible. We're on the cusp of the third wave. We must throw everything at this to both your public sector and government sector. If we can be vaccinating 300,000-400,000 people a day, we must be doing that.
Absolutely right. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for. Dr. Ron Whelan, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Discovery Health. Thank you for all of the work that you are doing. Thanks for having a very open and real conversation with me. I'm Howard Feldman. This has been a Synthesis COVID podcast. Don't forget to subscribe below. Keep sending us your questions. Our next conversation will be on Sunday, as always, with pulmonologist Dr. Anton Meiberg. Be safe, be careful, take care, and God bless.